I'm Judith, 73, and for the first time in nearly 50 years, I am alone. The house is quiet. It's a specific kind of quiet, not peaceful, but empty. It's the sound of a missing heartbeat. My days follow a simple gray script. I wake up. I make 1 cup of coffee. I read the paper at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair opposite me. 8 months. 8 months since I held Sarah's hand and told her it was okay to rest. 8 months since the life I knew evaporated, leaving this echo. But today, something is about to change. An old friend, her old friend, is coming to visit, and I'm not sure my quiet, broken world is ready for it. Do you believe a heart can heal after it's been truly broken? I wasn't so sure. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The 7 a.m. sun did what it always did. It streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the small, dancing dust motes in the air. It was, objectively, a beautiful morning. The kind of bright, crisp autumn day Sarah would have loved. She would have already been in the garden, wrapped in her old red cardigan, coffee mug in hand, yelling at the squirrels to leave the bird feeder alone. But the garden was still. The red cardigan was folded in a drawer upstairs, and I was the only one to see the sunlight hit the floor. I'm Judith Miller, 73, and I am a creature of hollow habits. My slippers, the worn blue ones, whispered against the hardwood floor as I moved to the counter. The coffee maker gurgled to life, a small mechanical sound in the vast human silence. I measured the grounds for one. This had been the hardest part to learn. For 48 years I had measured for 2. The first few weeks I'd made a full pot out of sheer, stubborn denial. I'd poured half of it down the drain every morning, the dark liquid swirling away like my own resolve. Now I just made 1. It was easier. Acceptance, my grief counselor had called it. It felt more like surrender. I took my mug to the kitchen table and sat in my usual chair. Sarah's chair, the one facing the garden, remained empty. It was a shrine. A void. I opened the local paper, the ink staining my fingertips, and pretended to read. The words blurred. Town council approves new zoning. High school football team wins. It was all noise from a world I no longer belonged to. The house itself was a museum of our life together. Every object held a story. The chipped yellow bowl on the counter was from a flea market in 1978. The watercolor of the seashore in the hall was a gift from Margaret for our 20th anniversary. And upstairs in the closet was the scent. Sarah's scent. A mix of her rose-scented lotion and the faint, comforting smell of the lavender sachets she tucked into her drawers. Sometimes, when the echo in the house became too loud, I would go upstairs, open that closet, and just breathe. I would stand there until my lungs ached, trying to inhale the very essence of her. It was a painful, desperate comfort. A polite tap, tap, tap on the back door startled me, making me slosh coffee onto the newspaper. I froze. Nobody used the back door. Nobody except. I looked through the glass pane. David Chen, my neighbor from 2 doors down, was standing on the patio, holding a small paper bag. He gave me a hesitant, sad smile and held up the bag. David was a nice man. Retired postal worker. Lost his own wife, Helen, a few years back. He'd been trying, in his quiet way, to check in on me. A wave from his yard. A nod when I got the mail. Once he'd left a small pot of mums on my front step with a simple note. Thinking of you. David. I wiped my hands on my housecoat and unlocked the door, opening it just a crack. The cool morning air felt sharp. Morning, Judith, he said, his voice soft. He didn't try to look past me into the house. I was at the bakery. They had these sticky buns, Helen's favorite. Got an extra one. Thought you might. Well, he held out the bag. The smell of cinnamon and warm sugar wafted out, a scent of pure, simple normalcy. It was so normal it felt like a betrayal. Very kind of you, David, I managed, my voice rusty. Thank you. I took the bag. Our fingers brushed. His hand was warm. You take care of yourself, okay? He said, already stepping back, giving me my space. I will. Thank you, David. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I held the warm pastry bag against my chest. A simple act of kindness. A sticky bun. and all I could do was cry. The tears came silently, hotly, blurring the kitchen into a watercolor of sunlight and shadow. It wasn't sadness, not entirely. It was everything. The kindness of a near stranger. The emptiness of the chair. The fact that Sarah wasn't here to share this sticky bun with me. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8 a.m. It was an anchor, pulling me back. I wiped my face on my sleeve. Today was different. Today, the echo was going to be broken by a voice I hadn't heard in this house in almost a year. Margaret was coming. Sarah's best friend. Margaret, who had been Sarah's maid of honor at our small, defiant wedding ceremony back when such things were only whispers. Margaret, who knew Sarah in ways I never had, who knew the college girl, the young woman finding her way. Her rental car was due at 11 a.m., a small, cold knot of dread settled in my stomach, pushing aside the cinnamon smell. Margaret was a lot. She was warm, yes, but she was also pragmatic. She was a florist. She dealt with life and death and celebration and grief all in one day. She didn't tiptoe. I wasn't sure I could handle someone who didn't tiptoe. I looked at the sticky bun. It was too big for one person. I wrapped it in foil and put it on the counter. Maybe later, I went upstairs to the guest room, the room that had been Margaret's room for decades of visits, the room that had been empty for 8 months. I ran my hand over the clean, smooth quilt. I opened the window to let in the fresh air, to clear out the smell of disuse. I was dusting the empty knitstand when I saw it, tucked behind a small lamp. A photograph in a simple silver frame. It was Sarah and Margaret, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning, probably in their late 20s. They were on a beach, hair wild with wind, sunlight making them squint. They looked invincible. I picked it up. I had always loved this photo. Sarah's joy was a supernova in it. But looking at it now, I felt a sharp, unfamiliar pang. It wasn't grief. It was jealousy. A small, ugly flicker of it. Margaret was getting on a plane. She was living her life. She was coming here to my house, to my grief, and she still had her memories, whole and separate from mine. She had a piece of Sarah that I could never, ever touch. The empty echo of the house seemed to deepen, filling with a new, complicated silence as I waited for the sound of a car in the driveway. A knock at the door, the clock ticked. 10:45, 10:50. I had changed out of my housecoat and into a pair of gray slacks and a pale blue sweater. It felt like dressing for a funeral. I'd brushed my hair, pulling it back into its usual neat bun at the nape of my neck, but I hadn't put on any makeup. What was the point? I was standing in the living room, ostensibly dusting a bookshelf that was already spotless, when I saw the car. A generic white rental sedan. It pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching on the gravel. A sound that seemed shockingly loud. My heart hammered against my ribs. You can do this, Judy. It's just Mags, it's for Sarah. The car door opened, and Margaret Shaw unfolded herself from the driver's seat. She looked the same. Her short, steel-gray hair was styled in its usual practical, windswept cut. She wore sensible sneakers, jeans, and a bright teal jacket that seemed to defy the somber occasion. She was 71, but she moved with the brisk, forward-leaning energy of the florist she'd been for 40 years, as if she was always on her way to wrangle a large delivery. She grabbed a wheeled suitcase from the trunk and, without pausing to look at the house, marched right up the front walk. The doorbell rang. The sound was a shock. Sarah and I had always used the back door. The doorbell was for strangers, for salespeople. I walked to the foyer, my feet feeling heavy as if the floor had turned to mud. I took a deep breath, plastered on a small, weak smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes, and opened the door. Mags, I said. My voice cracked. Judy. Margaret stood on the welcome mat, her suitcase handle in her hand, her purse slung over her shoulder. Her face was a landscape of familiar wrinkles, and her eyes, a sharp, clear blue, scanned my face with an intensity that made me want to recoil. She didn't smile, not at first. She just looked at me, really looked at me, in a way no one had in 8 months. Then her expression softened just a fraction. Well, aren't you going to let me in? This bag weighs a ton. Oh! Yes, of course. I'm sorry. I stepped back, holding the door wide. Margaret wheeled her suitcase into the foyer. and the scent of the outside world of airplanes and rental car upholstery and a faint, sharp perfume rushed in with her, displacing the stagnant air. She stopped in the middle of the entryway, right under the chandelier, and let go of her bag. And then we just stood there. What was the protocol for this? Were we supposed to hug? The last time we'd seen each other was at the memorial service. A blur of black suits, casseroles, and whispered condolences. We'd hugged then, a brief, frantic clinging like two people shipwrecked. But now it was just us. Margaret solved the problem. She dropped her purse on the floor with a heavy thud and just opened her arms. "Oh, Judy," she sighed. I walked into her embrace, and it was nothing like I'd expected. It wasn't soft or pitying. Margaret's hug was solid, grounding. She was shorter than me, but she felt like an oak tree. She patted my back, two firm, decisive thumps. "It's good to see you," she said, I had just poured the boiling water over 2 bags of English breakfast tea when Margaret came back downstairs. Downstairs. Her face scrubbed clean and her teal jacket swapped for a comfortable-looking gray cardigan. She sat down at the kitchen table. Not in my chair and not, thank God, in Sarah's. She took the 3rd chair, the one that faced the hallway. "Ah, that's the stuff," she said, inhaling the steam from the mug I'd placed in front of her. "Now, how are you? And don't give me the dime-fine nonsense." I sat opposite her, cradling my own mug. "I don't know," I admitted. It was the truest thing I'd said in months. "Most days are quiet. I get by. You look thin," she observed, sipping her tea. "Are you eating?" "Of course I'm eating." I thought of the untouched sticky bun from David. "Sometimes." Margaret nodded, as if this confirmed a suspicion. "Right, well, we'll fix that." "I'm starving." "What's in the fridge?" The question was so jarring, so practical, that I was momentarily stunned. I've eggs. Some yogurt. There's bread for toast." "Toast it is," she said. "But first I wanted to give you this." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small velvet-covered box. It was a dark blue, worn at the edges. "I was cleaning out my jewelry box last week," she said, pushing it across the table. "I'd forgotten I even had it." "It's not—" "Well, just open it." My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on faded cream satin, was a small silver locket, heart-shaped, with intricate etching on the front. It was tarnished with age. "It was Sarah's," Margaret said quietly. "She gave it to me right after we graduated college. She just met you. She said she was so full of love, she felt she had to give some of it away or she'd burst. She told me to keep it until you need a reminder." I stared at it. I'd never seen it before. "I think you need the reminder more than I do," Margaret finished. I picked it up. It was cool to the touch. I fumbled with the clasp, and it sprang open. Inside were 2 tiny postage stamp-sized photos. On one side, a young, laughing Margaret. On the other, a young woman with dark, wavy hair and a smile that could light up a room. It was Sarah, but not my Sarah, not the 72-year-old woman whose hand I'd held as she slipped away. This was Sarah at 22, full of fire and promise, a Sarah I had never known. "Oh," I whispered. The sound was barely audible. "She was a force of nature, wasn't she?" Margaret said, her voice soft with memory. I couldn't speak. I just traced the tiny image with my fingertip. And then I caught it. A scent. Faint, impossibly faint. It was coming from the box. From the old satin lining. Rose and lavender. It was her. It was the scent from the closet upstairs. The scent I chased in my dreams, the scent of her lotion and her sachets. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. A sob, a raw, ugly sound tore itself from my throat. The mug rattled in my hand. I slammed it down, sloshing tea onto the table, and buried my face in my hands. The tears I had been holding back all day, all week, came in a flood. It wasn't the gentle, quiet weeping I'd become used to. This was a storm, a hurricane of grief that shook my entire body. I was vaguely aware of Margaret getting up, of the scrape of her chair. I waited for the pat on the back, there. Instead, a box of tissues was set firmly on the table in front of me. Go on, Margaret said, her voice firm but not unkind. She sat back down. Let it out. You're allowed to be a mess, Judy. God knows you've earned it. She didn't touch me. She just sat. She let me fall apart. She sipped her tea and passed me tissues, creating a small, safe space for my ugliness and my pain. She wasn't scared of it. She wasn't trying to fix it. She was just present. I cried until my head pounded and my nose was raw. I cried for the woman in the locket and the woman she'd become. I cried for the empty chair and the pot of coffee I no longer made. I cried because the scent of roses and lavender was finally fading from the box. And I knew one day it would fade from the closet. 2. Finally, the storm passed, leaving me exhausted, hollowed out and strangely calm. I blew my nose one last time, my hands shaking. I'm sorry, I mumbled, wiping my eyes. I got it on the table. It's just water, Judy, Margaret said, grabbing a dish rag from the sink. And you never have to apologize to me for that, for her. She wiped up the spilled tea, her movements efficient. Now, she said, turning back to me. I'm still starving. Where's that bread? I looked at her, really looked at her. Her own eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying too, but quietly, privately, while I had my storm. The bread, I said, my voice hoarse. It's in the pantry. As I got up to get it, the locket felt heavy in my hand. Margaret had done more than just give me a piece of silver. She had opened a door. She had brought the scent of the past into the sterile silence of my present, and in doing so, had given me permission to finally, truly grieve. Chapter 4. 2 cups of tea the following morning. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a bus. My eyes were swollen, my head ached, and for a disorienting moment, I couldn't place the low hum I was hearing. It was voices. Downstairs, I pulled on my housecoat, my heart thumping. Had I forgotten something? I padded down the hallway and paused at the top of the stairs. No, I told her, you can't plant hydrangeas there, Sarah. The morning sun is too harsh. Stubborn as a mule. Of course, they all died within a month. Served her right. It was Margaret. She was on the phone. And she was laughing. A low, throaty chuckle. I crept down the stairs, not wanting to interrupt. She was in the kitchen, a mug of coffee in hand, leaning against the counter, her back to me. I know. I'll tell her. Yes, I'm making sure she eats. Don't worry, Susan. Talk soon. Bye. She hung up her cell phone and turned, seeing me. Morning, she said, cheerful. There's coffee. I hope you don't mind. I found the good beans Sarah always hid in the freezer. I know, that's fine. I poured myself a cup. The coffee was strong, just as she'd made her tea. Who was that? My daughter, Susan, just checking in. Margaret took a sip from her mug. I brought the sticky bun David left you back to life in the microwave. It's on the table. We can split it. We sat at the table, the same table where I'd cried yesterday. But today, the sun seemed warmer. The silence wasn't empty. It was just breakfast. We ate the sticky bun, passing the plate back and forth, our fingers getting covered in glaze. So, Margaret said, licking her thumb. The plan today. If you're up for it. I tensed. The plan? The sorting. It's why I came, Judy, to help you with Sarah's studio. My stomach dropped. Sarah's art studio. It was the spare room at the back of the house. I hadn't opened the door in 8 months. It was too much. It was the most her room in the house. I don't know, Mags, I whispered. I don't think I can. You don't have to, she said, her voice gentle again. We can just open the door. We can just stand there. Or I can go in, and you can tell me what to do from the hallway. Whatever you want. But Judy, it's just stuff. The woman is gone. The stuff is just stuff. We can't let it sit there and rot. She would have hated that. She was right. Sarah hated clutter. She hated letting things go to waste. Okay, I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. Okay, after breakfast. We can look. An hour later, we stood in front of the door. The brass knob felt cold under my hand. I turned it and pushed. The door swung open with a soft shush. It was just as she'd left it. Canvases were stacked against the wall. Jars bristled with brushes, their tips stained with a rainbow of dried paint. A half-finished painting sat on the easel, a landscape of the coast, the sky a brilliant, unfinished blue. And the smell, not roses and lavender this time. This was linseed oil, turpentine, and dusty canvas. The smell of her passion. I stood in the doorway, unable to move. Margaret walked right in. She picked up a tube of paint, cadmium red. She always loved her reds. She moved to the easel. This is beautiful. I wonder where she was going with this. She wasn't mourning. She was appreciating. She was always so messy, I said, the first words that came to mind. I was always nagging her to clean her brushes. Margaret laughed. I know. Remember that time in college she spilled an entire bottle of Black India ink on the white dormitory carpet? She tried to cover it with a beanbag chair for a whole semester. A small surprised laugh escaped me. She never told me that. Oh, there's a lot she didn't tell you, Mag said, a twinkle in her eye. She was a menace. A lovely, brilliant menace. She picked up a framed photo from the desk. It was of the three of us, at Margaret's retirement party a few years ago. Sarah was in the middle, her arms around both our shoulders, her smile wide and joyous. We were a good trio, weren't we? Margaret said softly. We were, I said. I took a step into the room. Then another. I ran my hand along the wooden edge of the easel. She loved this room. She loved you, Margaret said, putting the photo down. She loved this room because you gave it to her. You know, she told me once. She said, Judy is my anchor, Mags. She keeps me from floating away on all my crazy ideas. She said ... You're my best friend, but Judy is my home. The tears came again, but this time they were different. They were quiet, warm. They weren't the tears of a storm. They were a gentle rain. I looked at Margaret, who was busy sorting a pile of sketches. She wasn't just Sarah's best friend. She was the only other person on earth who had loved Sarah as deeply as I had, just ... differently, and she was the only person who understood the magnitude of what was lost.